of the Mummy is directed by Johnny Tabor, written by Gary Charles, and stars William McNamara, Danny Glover, Michael Cortez, and Brandon Despain. So Day of the Mummy is about this guy named Jack Wells, I believe, played by William McNamara, who is this like Indiana Jones ripoff, and he's contacted by his enemy. His friend is something, I don't know what he is. Carl, played by Danny Glover, who tells him to go to this hidden tomb in Egypt or something and find this vaguely defined artifact called the Codex Stone so we can return it to Carl. But then there's something about a mummy at the end of the movie, but whatever. Now, just like my review for Exists, I don't know either why I watched this movie. I don't know what I'm talking about right now, but here we are. This is not a found footage horror movie like you might think from watching the trailer if you've ever heard of this movie. It's not really a found footage movie per se. It's kind of like a variation of that. It's like a remix of that, because like they have like glasses in this movie that serve as the found footage thing, but it's not really found footage anyway. It's mostly first person, so it really has more in common with the movie Maniac with Elijah Wood in it, which is pretty much all in first person. So that's the gimmick, but it doesn't help because this is, I find it hard to call a movie one of the worst movies I've ever seen, because the worst movies I've ever seen, I don't even consider them movies. So this falls into that category. The writing is non-existent, the directing is non-existent, and has probably some of the worst editing and pacing I've ever seen in my life. So in the very first scene of Day of the Mummy, you've got William McNamara like sitting in bed, lying in bed, and like he has like two women with him. And then he gets a call from Danny Glover, so he stands up and he has this bulging stomach. And I'm not saying that guys with bulging stomachs can't get girls, because obviously they can. It's just that if you're gonna make, an Indiana Jones ripoff, at least give the actor, cast an actor with like the physicality and the attitude of Indiana Jones, or at least tell William McNamara to actually get in shape or something. But all we have is this, so whatever illusion they were trying to set up is completely shattered. So he goes over to Danny Glover, who's on his laptop, his fake laptop, by the way, because it looks like they had just photoshopped like an image of a laptop onto the screen, and then Danny Glover is like speaking from it. Yeah, thankfully there's no other visual effects after this first scene. But even like with some of the violence that happens in the movie, it's not even as grisly as most typical bad horror movies. It doesn't even have that going for it. So Danny Glover gives William McNamara like this pair of glasses that will feed, like constantly give him a live video feed of whatever William McNamara is seeing, so Danny Glover can see if he's actually doing his mission. And this sidesteps the issue that most found footage horror movies have of like, why are they still recording this? Like, no one would still be holding onto their camera at this point. So they sidestep that problem, but then they add another problem, which is that these glasses don't even act like normal glasses. They stay on his face the entire time. They don't break, they don't smudge, they don't crack or anything. So, it's unrealistic camera work once again, and again, it shows me how lazy so many people are with making a horror movie. They're just not committed to doing it. Now, by the time they get to like the cave or whatever, I was actually a bit surprised at first with how they seem to be using like real tunnels and caves and whatnot. And then I got bored really fast when I realized how real tunnels look the same the entire time. There's no production design or anything. There's nothing to give, this tomb like any flavor of sorts, so it's so boring to look at. And by the time the mummy shows up, it's the most obvious like man in a suit costume you've ever seen. Like it feels like it's just one piece. Like there are no moving parts. It's not falling apart like you'd expect a mummy to be. So it again just shatters the illusion even more. And this movie is paced so poorly that the movie feels 30 minutes longer than it actually is. And this movie's only like an hour 20 minutes. But by the time it ends, it still feels like it ended too abruptly, because nothing happens in that hour and 20 minutes. And the mummy, the titular Day of the mummy in that title only actually appears for a few minutes on screen during the last 15 minutes of the movie. So you spent an hour and 5 minutes like not doing anything. I apologize for calling this movie a horror movie in the past few minutes, because it's not a horror movie. I mean, there isn't even any fake tension that would lead to like any stupid jump scares. I mean, for once in my life, I've seen a movie that actually would have benefited from stupid jump scares, but it doesn't even have that. and there's no visual storytelling to the editing at all, so there's nothing to the editing. And the plot of this movie never actually gets farther or deeper than the synopsis that I just mentioned a while ago. Like, that's it. That's all you need to know. Because there's no real explanation of what this whole Codex Stone thing does. You never see it in action. There's no explanation to why this mummy has like a curse or whatever, why these people are getting into the bad situation that they've gotten into. And there's like no explanation for why Carl actually wants this Codex Stone apart from, you know, it's like some sort of rare artifact. And there's such a terrible lack of characterization throughout the movie that, you know, these actors who are playing these so-called characters end up becoming pretty much NPCs in a bad video game. That's how bad they are. And, you know, for a movie with no plot, there's so much exposition for some reason, and for a movie with no characters, there's so much time dedicated to just you know, them sitting around talking and having useless random banter. It's unbelievable. Like I mentioned, not only does William McNamara lack like the acting talent to be a lead in any sort of movie, but he also lacks the charisma and the physicality of, you know, an Indiana Jones ripoff, which is what he's trying to be here. Danny Glover is kind of hilarious in the fact that he phones it in so much in this movie that there's a visible lack of change with his facial expressions throughout the entire movie, and he's literally just kind of sitting in the corner of the screen, like, because you're just seeing it through the glasses, so he's just kind of there. And it's so funny because it's so awkward how, you know, his face doesn't change even as all these things are happening. So it feels like he just alt-tabbed and, you know, was looking at something else while the movie was going on, which I wouldn't blame him for. And there's this girl in the movie that Jack like somehow forms a relationship with or something, and she's terrible. So it's the stupidest thing ever because it's the only chance this movie had at creating some sort of emotional connection, and they fail at that. Day of the Mummy is the kind of movie that makes you forget that there was a director behind all of this, because you don't feel any of that, you know, directorial touch. There is no style, there is no attempt to elevate the already bare bones material with any sort of creativity. In fact, there's so much of nothing in this movie that I would normally be offended by how a movie would treat its sole female character like in such a bad way. But there's so much nothing in the movie that I can't even find it in me to, you know, care that much. You know, and even the way they treat Egyptians also, like, normally I would think it would be kind of racist, but even now, like, I just kind of shrugged it off like some sort of internet troll or something. You know, again, the movie is lacking in like so much of everything that watching it kind of feels like you're trying to brush a fly away. Like, you know, watching the movie ends up becoming sort of like white noise after a while. You space out and you realize you're just kind of like trying to bat away the fly, but you're not thinking about the fly. You're just thinking about something else as you bat away the fly, and then you snap out of it and you realize, oh, there's a fly, aka the movie. So if you haven't guessed from my tone of voice and what I've been saying, this movie is terrible. It is probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's not even so bad it's good. This is not Sharknado. This is not even The Room with Tommy Wiseau. And it's unfortunate that our cinemas still get like direct-to-DVD stuff like this when we could be, I think, fighting for, you know, better quality stuff. We deserve much better than this. But those are my thoughts on Day of the Mummy. Have you guys seen it? I hope not. But what did you think of it? Did you hate it or did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.